So, welcome to the platform, the new Nigerian platform. It's a privilege to have you on board. We know you're a very eloquent author. We've seen some of your books. I'm sure there's one in the background. But let us start with who Stella Oni is. Would like to take your memory back to when you were born, where you were born, what primary schools, secondary schools you went to. Tell us a bit about your childhood. Give references, please, to things that started to trigger you, to make you become who you are.
Okay. So what I would say is that from my own experience, I would say that maybe between the age of 0 to 10 is very, very crucial to a child's life. And even in terms of, because I studied linguistics, so in terms of languages, it's actually the bedhouse of languages as well. So in terms of what you form, your impressions of the world, the 0 to 10 is very, very crucial. Afterwards, of course, life's experience impacts your life as well. So when I go from my age from 0 to 10, I just think about myself. I was born in the UK, so I was born here in the UK, but my mom could not cope with the racism and everything that was going on. She just could not cope. So, and she was an only child, so she took me back when I was about 2, and my brother, and we went back to Nigeria. She ran back to her mommy in Nigeria. So, and then from there, because I'm actually half, so I'm 50-50, I'm not full Benin. So okay. I've got 2 great blood coursing through me. I'm Yoruba and Benin. So I've got the Edo Kingdom and the Yoruba, blood in me. And the beauty of it is that I have both culture in me as well, because I grew up in Lagos. So when I was young, I actually grew up in Lagos and part of the time in Ibadan, and then the rest in Benin. So I didn't get to Benin till I was about secondary school age. So I was in Lagos with my mom then took me back to Nigeria, and I lived with my grandma, and mom came back to the UK, to join my dad. So I actually grew up with my grandmother, and that was, I tell you something, a lot of people probably grew up with their grandparents. That experience of growing up with my grandmother, I would say, was crucial to who I am now. Because my grandmother was an only child like my mom. So she had half sisters. So my mom was, abroad. Her child was abroad. She had these 2 children to look after. She was there, she was, on her own. So most of the time she hung out with her half sister. She had a very, very half sister that she was very close to. Now that half sister lived in the wherever the half sister lived, we were always there. So I got to know the internal, when they say the internal workings of Lagos, the deep internal workings of, when I was a child, I knew Lagos, the internal workings of Lagos at the back of my hand. I've got a blog called African Britishness, actually, where I write this, my childhood. I write a little bit about my childhood and all the influences. And one of the influences was just the idea of the hawkers, the idea of food selling on the streets of Lagos, coming across the night markets, so many things that formed impression, in Lagos. I went to, my primary school, I went to A Lady of Apostle primary school. And then from there, went to another school in Ibadan. So part of my primary school was A Lady of Apostle, and then I went to a school in Ibadan called UMC. I was actually trying to find it, because I think I was like maybe primary. I can't remember what primary school I went through. So it was maybe primary 5 or primary 4 that I went to UMC. And I was trying to track them on Facebook to try and see whether they still exist. And they're there, So
Okay.
because of that childhood in Nigeria, my first language, of course, being with my grandmother, is Yoruba. So of course I'm working backwards now to say, what was your first language? My first language would have been Yoruba more than anything else, because of my grandma. And the culture, Lagos, of course, as you know, is a mishmash, but it was just so deep in terms of music, in terms Sunny Ade, everything and my mom loved music. So my mom loved music and film and reading. So as a child, I don't know what happened. I was like a sponge. I think I was just absorbing all those things. And then, of course, when we went to Ibadan is steeped in deep culture. It's a very, very cultural center where we used to laugh at Ibadan and laugh at their accents, like Ibadan, Kini, so, all those things.
Yes.
So, but Ibadan, what people don't know about Ibadan is that where Lagos was a place where it was all impression for me, which is, the street hawkers, the food, all those things about Lagos.
Yes.
Ibadan was a place where my reading developed, where my love of reading and writing developed. Ibadan had literature. Ibadan had literature in Yoruba and in English.
Oh.
So I started reading in Yoruba and in English. They had comics. They had one comic called Atoka. I remember that comic. When Atoka is coming, before everybody, it's in Yoruba. So you can imagine the whole population. We want to see what the next Atoka is. We want to see. Everybody is waiting for that comic, graphic comic. I'll go and track it actually,
Yes.
And then we used to watch all those Yoruba. There was deep traditional, what do they call it? Plays on TV. So it was so steeped in culture that I just absorbed all that. So that was it. And then secondary school, then my parents came. And of course, when they came, my dad was an engineer. He had finished and, he wanted to go back to his, own city. So we moved to Benin City. So I did my secondary school in Anglican Girls Grammar School, still known as Adesua Grammar School as well.
Yes.
And and then we lived around the GRA area. We were in a private estate for a while, which was awesome. It was brilliant. And then we moved to other places as well. Yeah.
Let me ask, your grandmother, she seemed to have been a great influence in your life. Tell us about her, because that culture, you got it from her. Let's know a bit more about your grandmother.
Yeah. So my grandmother was, she actually passed away when I was 11, and it was heartbreaking, that she passed away so young, because she really did influence me. My grandmother was a princess in a little hamlet deep in Ondo State, and her mother as well was her mother. I will talk about my books later, but her mother, my great grandmother, was a big influence on me. So I have this influence of both my grandmother, who was very artistic. She used to draw. Okay. So she would draw like comics. She would draw, and she would do it like comic and put bubble images. But she would draw.
That's where you now got the urge to read.
I wish I had those figures that she used to draw. She would draw those figures and put those things would be classics for me now if I could get hold of them, So she would draw in bubbles and she would put speech marks. And then my mom was a reader. So, but my grandmother she was very, very she was a lovely, lovely woman. But at the same time, she was very steeped in the Yoruba, the culture, she was steeped in that. So, I think she was quite liberal in the sense that, if I wanted to act a play, I actually acted. I remember when I acted in a play there was something called, I forgot what it was. It was a Yoruba, it was a play that for children. It was a children's hour at 5 p.m. And they used to go around to primary schools and they would get people to come and act. And I was one of the people that acted, and they call it Omode Metan Shere. So it was like, and then you act. And I acted and I loved acting. I loved reading. My mom had a big library, and my mom she was a presenter. She was a radio presenter, by the way. My mom.
All right. Okay.
She was one of the first presenters, acting, radio, singing in those days where it was not fashionable. My mom was that. So it was all that mix of my grandmother and my mom that kind of formed me. And then, of course, my grandmother, I told you she was an only child, so used to take us, and once the holidays come, we go into the village. So she used to take us to the village, in deep in Ondo, it's called Ajowa. So her mom was there, so we used to go to the village. And my great grandmother was the feminist of her generation. And I've got a series that is going to be roughly based on her. I'm going to do this history. It's going to be almost historical in what I'm doing, just to do a kind of historical fiction. And it will be like a cozy crime series. I already have the concept. And my grandmother She owned her own, my great-grandmother owned her own land,
Yes.
was the only woman that built her own house in the village. You know, she was a feminist of her generation. She had her own farmland. She had people working for her. She was great. She was great.
All right. So there you are, returning with your parents to Benin.
Yeah.
Moving into AGGS, the Adesua Girls Grammar School. At that time, I believe was one of the best schools in Benin, if I'm not underestimating it.
Yeah, it was, there was Idia, Eden,
Yes.
and Adesua. I remember.
Yeah, so it was
the
Idia,
best
Eden, then Adesua.
Yeah.
I know that during the march past that on Children's Day in the stadiums, I know they used to march to, so they were classed as one of the quality schools. Yeah. So take us through that period of your life, moving from one culture, the Yoruba culture, to the Benin culture. A completely different contrast, even though they are uniquely aligned, but tell us a bit about moving to Benin, how you settled in, any impactful things in your secondary school that continue to affect how you are and develop you, really.
Okay, so my grandmother, when I was growing up with my grandmother, she was a Christian, so she went to church. She actually went to a white garment church, so she was like those Aladoras. So that influenced me a lot. So my book always has those tones of supernatural and religion in it. Always has, not all the books, but some, this series. So anyway, yeah. So growing up in Benin, when I went to Benin, it was then my maternal grandmother and my paternal grandmother, who was not a Christian. She was an Olokun worshipper.
Okay.
Simple and true.
Yeah.
She was not a Christian. She was an Olokun worshipper. So I got to see the worship of deities.
Yes.
Very, very close and personal. I saw it very well. So that's kind of like, there will be some kind of influences in my writing in terms of that.
Yes.
So, and then, my when we got to Benin, my parents didn't attend church, so I didn't go to church. So all I had was a reading. So my mom had these vast libraries of all sorts of books. And my dad was the literary one that had the nice books, the African writers, the good quality literature. He had that. So I had access to both their libraries because I preferred my mom's library, but I still read my dad's library. So I got introduced to quite a lot of African writers. I now go back to the fact that I did get, because I remember writing an article saying that, no, I hadn't, but I had some exposure to African literature through my dad, I remembered. So the Benin culture, in terms of language and everything, I don't know whether we were kind of like, it's not that we were not part of the culture, but because of the way we were brought up, we were not kind of like, it's only when I was with my grandma, with my maternal grandmother, then the culture was quite, showed very, very much, in terms of the steeped in culture, in terms of even when, I remember when I think it was Akezua that died and all the men shaved their heads. Every single man in Benin shaved their heads. And that was, those things form an impression. That formed a great impression in terms of how the respect for the Oba and the deep grieving that the people went through in order to, respect him. Going to the markets always formed big. It's a big area because markets have all sorts in them, So I kind of like, so it was kind of like a mix in Benin because that was where I got really deep into my reading, doing a bit of writing, but the reading aspect was in Benin. I really I lost myself in reading. I think my grandmother passed away just as I think I'd done the first year, so it was secondary school, class 1, maybe going to class 2 when she passed away. So it was really, really traumatic for me when she passed away. She was sick anyway and she passed away. So from there, I just buried myself in books. So
reading.
Yeah, I read a
Did
lot.
you make friends in the school? Are you still in contact with some of them?
Yeah. My best friend in secondary school, we're in contact. You know,
Okay.
my best friend, who was my reading friend in Ibadan when I was in primary school, because we used to exchange comics and all that. I'm in contact with her. So I have all my best friends. I'm still in
Really?
contact with them. I'm still
Fa-
very, very in contact with my friends. And in AGDS, in order to survive, secondary school in Nigeria, because I sometimes I would board and sometimes I would not. You know, it depends on how the mood took me. But in the first kind of second year when my grandmother passed away, my parents then separated. So that was the impact was quite traumatic in the sense of my grandmother passed away, my parents separated, and I had to go to boarding school, you know.
okay.
So I kind of like in that sense I buried myself more in books and reading than anything else. That was my world. So and secondary school could be brutal in the sense of if you're a bit different, people pick on you. So I was a bit different. I had to wear glasses and tell you in those days the glasses were not pretty. They're not like today.
Okay.
So I had my own world, but I had my people, I had my crew, people who read the same books. So we all got together, people who were born here and could not fit in. So we couldn't fit in properly into, I don't know why, we couldn't. But yeah, so we just had our crew and we used to read, exchange books, go to each other's houses, and
Yes.
I wouldn't say I was the brightest of kids, but I wasn't, I was bright. Academically I was bright, I was okay, you understand, but I wasn't the brightest. I wasn't like medical kind of mind,
Oh, yes.
I was too steeped in my reading to the point that I got caught twice by the headmistress and punished because I was in a class where they were teaching and I had my book on my lap reading.
What kind of books?
I just
What
loved reading
novels?
everything. So yeah, I was reading things like, I started with the romance, so I read a lot of romantic books, and then
Mills
from
and Boone.
Mills and Boone, but I read everything. Treasure Island. Okay. I got exposed to the library early. So we used to go to the library, so a lot. Yeah. On Saturdays, Dad would take us to the library in, I can't remember, there was a library, I don't know if it was in Apapava Road.
Mission Road, one of the two.
Was it Mission? I can't even remember, but it was a library, and the library was amazing because on Saturdays they had a children's library where they would show us films. So they would show us films, we'll go into the library, our parents would drop off, and they would darken the room and watch a film, and they would go and borrow books.
Oh, I don't think any of the current children that are growing up in Benin now have access to that kind of imagination, that kind of thing, Hopefully we'll be able to find a solution and see if we can start such programs again. Right, so there you are, finished your secondary school.
Yeah.
You applied and were admitted to Uniben.
Yeah.
Amazingly, you were admitted to study linguistics. Yeah. I'm sure at that time it wasn't a well-known field of academic study for a secondary school student.
Yeah.
How did you arrive at that decision, and what were your expectations?
Okay, so with linguistics, as every parents want their children to study law or medicine or whatever, they go for all those big names, and so that wanted me to study law. But I think my marks were not high enough for law, so he found linguistics, thinking that okay, go and study linguistics, and in second year change to law. And I think a lot of students went through that way. He said, okay, go in and study this, and then in second year you can study law.
Absolutely.
And to be candid, I didn't like law. I didn't want to study law. And what I should have done, if I had been brave enough, Dad had been brave enough, and if we had known me enough. So that's why they say it's very important to know your children and what they want now. I should have studied literature. I would have aced it. I would have aced it because literature ruled my life everywhere I went. So had I studied literature, I would have just been. But in Nigeria in those days, if you study literature, all they could think about was you be a teacher.
Yes.
And the worst thing that could ever happen to me was being a teacher. I did not want to teach anybody. I was not interested in teaching. So I just felt if I studied anything else, I'd become a teacher. So I stuck to linguistics. So that was the gospel truth. I did not want to study law. And I told Dad, look, I don't want to study law. It's too dry for me.
Did linguistics offer a direction towards literature? They did offer or establish a foundation for writing?
Linguistics was very abstract. So it was linguistics and African languages. So to me, it was a very abstract course in the sense that I could not relate it to. It was just a study of languages. I mean, I understand it now, but when I was studying it, it was very obscure. But I went through with it and studied it. Like I said, in hindsight, what I should have done, I was actually going to change to linguistic and French, but I wasn't that keen. Like I said, it should have been maybe literature, because I did an option. The first year you have the option to study different things. So I think we had option in history, philosophy, and literature. And literature grabbed me more than anything else. So yeah, it's a good foundation in the sense that you become ordered in your thoughts and in the way language is formed. But in practical terms, no.
This was the University of Benin, am I right?
Yeah.
Right. At that time, the system worked so efficiently. Yeah. Tell me a bit about your experiences aside academic. Tell me about the hostel life. Tell me about your social life. Tell me about the bursary, mixing with people, experiencing that freedom on your own.
It was awesome. We were so young. So, yeah, young people thrown together, you know what happens. So, yeah, Benin was one of the top universities in Nigeria in those days. There was Ife, there was Unilag, all the other universities. I think it was Unilag, Ife, Benin. Is there any other one that comes to mind?
Ibadan,
University of Ibadan. But they were like Benin, Uniben. Going to Uniben was, it was awesome. It was great. Student life was incredible. We partied.
Incredible. Did you live in hostel or outside hostel?
No.
Hall 1 or Hall 2?
I think I was in Hall 1. I think my roommates were SU. So they didn't know what hit them.
Okay. I can imagine.
Because I was very innocent, but I knew exactly what I didn't want. And not what I wanted. What I didn't want was what they were doing. I didn't want that. I wanted to just enjoy my life, enjoy myself. Yes. And in that period, I don't even think I read much. I think I read a little bit. I was still used to go to the library. I found another library that was not too far from Ubowo, and I used to go down to that library. In every stages, I had contacts with libraries. So I would always go get a stack of books and read. Right. So I always read.
Brilliant. So this should bring us to your writing, your creativity. I think you have a book right now, it's behind you, Deadly Sacrifice.
Yes.
What's the background to the story from your point of view of life and your experiences?
Okay, so just arriving at the writing, I'll just talk about just how I arrived at that, in terms of the story was that. So came into the UK in my 20s and, was looking around to, of course, I now have my degree in linguistics and I was looking at what next to do, what do I want to do? And I had no clear, some people come with a clear idea of what they wanted. I didn't have a clear idea of what I really wanted to do. Most things were were not things I wanted to do, were not desirable to me. So I don't know. So I worked at various jobs. I think I worked at one point. I worked in admin. And all that, just to kind of see where I was going to firm up what I wanted to do. But Dad wanted me to do IT because he felt there was money in IT. But I resisted for a while, and then I now decided in my mid-20s onwards that actually I wanted to write. And I remember sending a letter to Dad and said I wanted to write, and he was like, oh my God, because writers are poor. And in those days, it was more, the people that were writers in those days were the men, there were lots of men, Chinua Achebe, Wole Soyinka, all those big names, and one or two women spread, the ones I could think of were Florence Wakba, there was Buchi Emecheta. here in the UK. And funny, I now became friends with. She became a sort of mentor,
Okay.
So when I started writing, I don't know how we met, but she became like a kind of mentor to me, and we were friends. She was at my wedding when I got married,
Okay.
Yeah, and I was at one of her son's weddings, so we were that close. And she was writing, and we used to chat and gist about the literary gossip and everything that was going on. So I was writing. So I gave myself. So I decided in my mid-20s I wanted to write, but I said I'll give myself 5 years to do it. If I didn't succeed at it, I'll go and study IT. And I told my dad that. I said, look, let me give you a chance because I really want to do this. I've read and read and read and read. I think I want to write. So he said, okay, if you give it a go, and if it doesn't work, go and study the IT, the masters. So yeah, so I started writing. So I wrote a literary work. It's still in my drawer somewhere. And it was really talked about just about what was going on in Nigeria, but I still find it very, very interesting. I created 5 distinct characters that represented Wazobia, funny enough. So I created 5 distinct characters. One was Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, but they were 5. So if you were Yoruba, Hausa, and Igbo, and I followed their lives. That's what I did, and I called it Manic Dancing.
Okay.
Yeah, and I tried to get it published. I tried. Gucci read it and gave me her feedback. She wasn't happy about what happened to the Igbo character. She's Igbo. Why did this happen to the Igbo? I said, but I didn't mean to say the Igbo like this. It wasn't about tribalism, it was just, it was just how it was. So, and then I tried the Heinemann had a few African writers series, blah, 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 blah. And then I just tried. At that time, I was writing like mad. So I didn't just write that. I got into journalism. I was writing for Classic, Mielen, Ezekiel. I wrote for Richard Mofeda Major Hamista as well. I wrote for that. So I did all that writing, and I couldn't get the work published. And then I now kind of like decided, look, I'm not going to bother with it anymore. I want to go and do my IT so that I can make some money, because of course when you're writing, I was working part-time and writing, so I was quite poor, and I was not enjoying being poor and doing this while watching everybody else, doing well, having money. So yeah, so I decided that, and then I just as I decided that, I got married, and I had a baby on the way. I was doing my master's and a big publishing house. I just started an imprint and I gave it to them. The editor was the new editor. I forgot. I'll try and remember the name of that, but they are well known now. The editor saw it and gave it to a reader. He said, I want to see it. And then it sent back. I still have the letter saying, look, this is the feedback on the reader. Flesh it out this way and send it back to me. And I just threw the letter aside and said, please, because I'd spent 5 years with this manuscript. I wasn't ready to do any more with it for now. I needed to move on with my life. I left it. So after that, I did my master's and I didn't write for 10 years. So
so you did your master's in IT?
I did my master's in IT at City Uni.
Right.
I didn't write for 10 years. I had my children. It was just so much. I didn't write. I didn't do any writing. And I, didn't even mix in the journalism world. Didn't know what was happening in the writing world for 10 years. And then I decided, after 10 years, I wanted to go back and deep into it. And a lot had changed in those 10 years. African literature was now more popular. I don't know when the King Writing Prize was created. I think it was around that time, or just after that, you had the King Writing Prize. So I decided to go back into the literary world, see what is happening there. But because, I don't know whether because I was just beaten or whatever happened to my literary work, I decided that, look, you read crime. Why don't you write crime? And then I looked around me. There was nobody like me writing crime.
Exactly. So it was an opportunity.
There was no one like me writing crime. And I said, where do I start from? So my old uni, City, I started looking because I always look, thank God for here, you could always kind of like do courses here, So I looked, I said, okay, the first thing I need to do is go and look for a course on how to write crime fiction because I really don't know where to start. I read a lot of crime fiction, but I don't know where to start. So there was a course at City Uni that was being taught for about, I think about 8 weeks or 12 weeks. So I enrolled. For it, went on the course. And at this time, a few years before, a young African boy, his torso was found in River Thames, called Adam. And as I was doing the course, towards the end of the course, I was still thinking about what to write. I started kind of like having an idea of my character. By the way, I'd actually written short stories for anthologies. So during that time, I started dipping my feet in the crime pool a little bit by writing short stories. So I'd written a few short stories, in anthologies. So I now decided that I think I wanted my character to be steeped, really, really entrenched in the system. I don't want her to be just at the fringe of the system. I wanted her to be entrenched. But when I started that, before that, I wasn't doing that. I was writing about a journalist and she was at the edge, she wasn't writing the crime. But when I went for the crime fiction writing and I got feedback, I said, look, try and put her in the mix of things. And when I wrote the first manuscript, the agent I gave it to, a literary agent, was saying, look, she's at the edge. So she's not writing the heart of the crime. So it was a lot of developments along the way. But the reason I decided to write Deadly Sacrifice was someone came to me in the class and said, look, the torso on the Thames, he wanted to write about it. And I decided, could I be an African consult? Could you come and consult me on it? It was white, male, middle class. I have nothing, it's not a race thing, but I just felt that he could not write. If he was going to write that story, then I'm not going to be the one to give him. It's almost like my story in a way. Why don't I write something that has, so that was the kind of backdrop to the story. So it's not about it, but it kind of influenced the story, was the one that I used as a backdrop to Deadly Sacrifice because of what happened to the young boy. And I told you, now let's link him back. That boy, when they did all their investigation, they found out that he was from Benin. They found out they couldn't find his killers, but through forensics and through so many things, they found out that the boy was from Benin City. So you can imagine. Don't forget my background. So I can,
yes.
Yeah. So it kind of like, look, there are many, 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 many more children and things like this have happened to. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but I just wanted to create something in the UK here with something similar. But I wanted my character to be a Black female African police officer, right in the heart of the Metropolitan Police. I didn't want her to be on the edge, on the fringe or anything. So right in the heart of it, and to solve this crime. So that was the idea. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yes, you have. As a novel, so for example, an aspiring author, you've just described how difficult it was for you to get your manuscripts published. What would you identify as that problem really, to get your manuscript to the printing or publishing phase? And how did you succeed in getting around some of these problems?
Okay. So I'll kind of like talk about the publishing world. I'm actually going to do a few things around publishing for people. I'm going to do some, I'm not sure whether it's going to be a podcast, but I'll be doing a few things in terms of YouTube and maybe TikTok on publishing, because a lot of people are writing. So in those days, many, many years ago, self-publishing only became popular recently. So in kind of like in 2010 onwards, around 2010, that's when it became popular. So I started my writing around 2000, because about 15 years, So I started my writing about 2005. Self-publishing did not even become fashionable to around 2010, 2011, or that at 2000. So because of that, if you want to get published, it's a traditional route. And the traditional route is full of gatekeepers. So it's the traditional publishing houses. And you were filtered. So if they had the voice of one black writer, that seemed to have been enough for the whole generation of writers. It was almost, because publishing is a business. So let's call a spade a spade. They want to make money. If your readers are white, middle class, and they're not interested in your story, why should they have to invest in you? So they just didn't feel that there were people that would buy your work. They didn't feel that they could be invested in your work enough, you know. But now there's rising, there's rise of middle class young people now who have the financial ability to buy books. So in those days, that was the gatekeeper. So it was difficult. And then I came along, and I'm very good. When I say I'm good at talking and networking and penetrating. So I was able to go to the heart of where people will be able to see me and show my work. So it wasn't for lack of showing my work, because the route you have to take in those days is you've got to try and it cannot be published without a literary agent. If you go direct to the publishers, they will throw your book on the slush. They've got a part called the slush pile, where all the manuscripts go, and it's like a needle in a haystack,
Okay, yes.
Yeah. So it was trying to get the agents to pay attention, and the book went out to a lot of agents, and you get rejected many, many times. A lot of authors go through that. So I got rejected many, many, many times, by agents. Some agents were more interested than others, but in the end, they just did not want to go with it. And structurally, and so many things, the manuscript, all I got back was, look, it needs more work, and we're business. We don't have the time to sit down with you and work with you. And so maybe perhaps I say that now to new authors, so maybe perhaps what I should have done then was actually giving it to, and I wanted to do it, give it to my old tutor. That would have made a big difference, because she would have worked on it and said, look, work on this and work on that, work on that. But I had to learn the framework, the writing, the structure and all that by myself over time, and then I'll go back to the gatekeepers again, again and again. So nowadays, people can self-publish their work. People can go through the same route, have independent professionals, because don't write without having independent professionals like editors. You have to pay money. Don't just sit down and write and say, oh yeah, I've got a book and I'm going to publish it. If you want to, especially fiction, non-fiction, you can get away with maybe an editor looking at your non-fiction work, and you can put it out there because people want the knowledge, they want the information. But in terms of fiction, you have to kind of like you have to have the same kind of edge on the market as everybody else. So you need to actually pay for editing, pay very, very well for editing. So what changed with me was, after many years of trying, this thing took me 15 years, by the way. So the whole process took 15 years. So I would go on and off. I tried, and it was always because you're not in my daily life. I was not surrounded by literary people.
Yes.
So I had to seek out the literary world. I was not surrounded by literary people. So it's almost like you were indulging. So I'll go back and say, okay, let me indulge in this thing again and try again. And then what changed was, I had a friend who stayed in the literary world, and she was always there and never left. She stayed there. So she would always come back and say, look, there's a prize, or there's this, or there's that. So there was a prize for Black and Asian unpublished writers, women writers, female writers. And she said, there's this prize that's just been, it's a biannual prize. Why, don't you apply for it? Put your manuscript in. And I, submitted the manuscript, and it was shortlisted. I didn't win the prize, it got shortlisted. So that gave me a kind of confidence, after I renewed confidence that, oh wow, so this manuscript has something, And then from there, I did more work on it, and then submitted it for the Jacaranda Publishing the black independent publishing company in the UK. Very, very well respected on their field. They have huge backlog of good quality, catalog of good quality writing. They're only about 7-8 years old. And, but like I said, well respected because you don't have a lot of independent black publishing company in the UK. So they decided, I think out of frustration and everything, decided that they would publish 20 black writers in 2020, not knowing what was coming in 2020. So we called it #2020. So what they did was they sent out a missile through media and everywhere else that they're looking for 20 black authors, poets, fiction and non-fiction work. So submit your work. There was a criteria for entry, and my friend told me about it. So I entered Deadly Sacrifice, and they came back some month later to say that I'm going to be published by them.
Oh, fantastic. Brilliant. Brilliant. So Deadly Sacrifice, let's go back to Deadly Sacrifice.
Yeah.
From your observation, who is the book for? What category of people? And has that met with your expectations?
So in terms of Deadly Sacrifice, when I write, I actually write for myself. So I always feel that there are people that share my own passion and, so if you share my passion or what I like, you probably like Deadly Sacrifice. So I did set out to say, oh, this is for this person or that is for this person. It was just people that like what I like, Yeah. If I read, these are the crime fiction that I read. If I read that, then other people will read that as well. So, and I didn't set out to write anything that was namby-pamby. I wanted to really, it's quite gritty. That's, when I hear from people. So I just wanted to write because I struggled with this because I thought, gosh, she's a police officer and this crime that she's solving is not, it's not a minor crime. It's a big one because it involved, it's about trafficking, human trafficking and child trafficking, and, something horrible that a lot of people will shy away from. A lot of authors shy away from anything that involves children. But at the same time, I thought, look at what happened with Adam in the torso in the Thames. They never found the killer. This one is for Adam, and this is for all children that even were not discovered. Because if they could get away with Adam, there might have been other children that they actually clean got away with, and we don't know. So this is for all these children that this had happened to. So that was just kind of like how it was. I can't remember the question again that you asked in terms of
who was it for, and
so
has that met your expectation?
So it's for people who read crime, and they read, they like, if it's gritty crime that they're interested in, they'll read it. So I have a diverse group of readers, so it's not just one set of readers. A friend of mine told me that she was on a train one day and she was shocked, and she said, oh, I saw somebody, a big balding white guy, and he's reading your book. And I said,
brilliant.
I have so I've got a diverse group of people reading it. I don't have one. If you're not a scaredy cat, you can read it.
What was the hardest thing to write? And in what sense was it the hardest for you, really?
The thing about it is that because it's not, it's a good read as a crime fiction. So as a crime fiction, I was interested in it myself, because you have to be a reader as well as a writer, So I knew that as a crime fiction, it can stand on its own and be read and enjoyed. The difficult part was the crime itself, a crime on a child. And it was very difficult in terms of and there was so much doubt in my mind, because a lot of authors, like I said, will stay away from anything that will harm children. But I didn't want to dig my head in the sand and say, this is not happening or this hasn't happened. I wanted to just highlight this young boy. They don't know who he is, what he is, but they know that something ritual was done to him in the Thames. You understand? So it's not about him, like I said. It was just the one that influenced. It was what happened to him that influenced the work. So that was the difficult part, writing about harm to
crime itself.
Yeah, it was difficult in that sense,
Yeah. So tell me, how is your novel sold? This podcast is going to go out to not only diaspora, it's going to go out to Nigeria as well.
Yeah.
It's a big market.
Yeah.
So let us know how the novel is being sold at the moment. Where do we find copies? And what do you intend to do going forward?
So the novel at the moment, because Jacaranda is based in the UK, it's available online. So if you go on Amazon, you can get e-copies. You can get hard copies as well through different. So it's distributed in most places online. So if you went to stores in the UK, you can actually get the novel. Like Waterstones and all the other bookshops. You can get a copy from those stores. Online, you can either buy it. I think what Jacaranda is now doing is they have a wider distribution network now system. They've partnered with another big house, Hachette, to have a wider distribution. So there'll be physical and wider distribution everywhere else. But Deadly Sacrifice is on Audible. So if you want,
brilliant.
It's on Audible. Okay. When it came out, it was Audible's crime fiction peak of September 2020. So so it was they have a peak every month, and it was a crime and thriller peak for Audible in September 2020. So it's available on Audible. So anybody that has Audible can buy the audio version,
Brilliant. I'll do that.
It's on Amazon. It's on Jacaranda. If you're based in the UK, it's on Jacaranda. So it's everywhere you can. Yeah.
Have you explored the Nigerian market? Have you explored the African market?
That's the discussion I now need to have with the publisher, because that's the thing. If I had self-published it, of course I would have done it that way. But because I didn't self-publish it, it was done by the publisher, and I have to have that discussion with the publisher about its availability in Nigeria. So I need to. We're talking about in terms of hard copy. But people can buy electronic copy, and people can get their copy on audio.
I'll tell you why I'm asking. We have a lady, her pseudonym is the Tail Weaver. She writes articles for us from Nigeria. She's a very talented author. She's written several books, and we did a small podcast with her recently, which we haven't published. She sells her books on, I think, Okada Publishers, or I think they have an online market, and that's where she sells her books, And I'm wondering, as we are talking and going along, I can see a scenario where I'm linking you both together. I can see a scenario where you could become a mentor or a partner, to do something big.
What kind of work does she write? What kind of
it's fiction.
Okay.
Fiction.
I don't know what kind of fiction. Is it literary or genre? I'll find out.
When I stop recording, I'll give you a bit more detail about her, that way I'm seeing a link coming about in that sphere at the moment in my mind. Now, are there any, with your marketing, what hurdles do you tend to encounter? And in terms of promoting your books, which I've asked already, what vision do you have for it in the African market? I know this is a place you want to look at. I know you're going to speak with Jacaranda, but going forward, how are you intending, how do you see the book doing in Africa?
Okay, so for me, for now, like I said, if you sign a contract with a publisher, you're kind of in their hands in terms of, what they do with the book. But going forward, I have other ideas, and I've got another series I'm actually working on at the moment, which one of them is actually nearly complete. It's a different series. This one, we call it the Tooks Ade Mystery Series, because she's a police officer, British Nigerian. The other series is set in London, and it's not gritty. It's actually kind of like almost like the number one ladies detective, Alexander McCall Smith's book, something like that, but set in London.
Yeah.
So for me now, when I go in to do the negotiation with a publisher, any potential publisher or any other publisher in the future, if they can't put, if the rights for the African part of the market, I either hold that right or they have to tell me their plans for publishing the book in Africa. I must have that plan because I don't want to be an African writing for just the West. I want my book to be out for Africans to read it. So when it comes to things like where it's going to be published, for the next set of maybe agreements, they either have to be clear about what they're going to be doing in terms of, and making it affordable as well, not just publishing it and not making it affordable, but making it affordable for that market. So that's number one. In terms of marketing, it was published in 2020 at the height of the pandemic. 20 authors, Jacaranda Books, they actually made history because they published every single author in 2020. They have massive plans to take us up to places, and sign books and all that, but that all was shelved. So we did all the marketing online. So now in terms of marketing, I do interviews, I'm on social media, I write articles. I have other works that are coming that is still Stella Oni. I've got a short story that is coming out in anthology at the end of the year in November by another publisher in America. So a short story is coming out and it's a new character. It's another series. I have several. So when I talk about series, just to make it clear, a series as an author, when you talk about series, you're talking about a different set of. So a series is a book that, you write the character and then that character continues. That's a series. But because I have other ideas for different kind of characters, so I've got this Toksade mystery series, and yes. Toksade mystery series this one was set in Nigeria and in London and Nigeria. So Toksade, so that's one series. The other series I'm working on, she's a housekeeper for a Nigerian billionaire in Knightsbridge, in a guest house, and she's very properly Nigerian. So I just set her amongst these incredibly rich people and let her loose. And it's brought something quite interesting back.
That was going to be my next question. What have you got in the oven? So please expand on that. That will be interesting for our viewers.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that in terms of marketing is an ongoing thing for any writer. And so what I say to any new writer is continue your interviews, your whatever it is, your social media and all that. People tend to approach me and want to interview. So the book will carry itself, but you continuing to write your book under your name or whatever, will make sure we highlight your back matter, which is your other work that you've done. So I'm not that concerned about going and saying, no, you have to buy Deadly Sacrifice. I'm happy for you to buy it, but I'm more interested in what I'm doing. And that's what most writers do. What is the next work and the next work and the next work? So you're marketing what you've presently got, but you're actually focusing on the next one. So my next one is writing the next one in this series. I've already got the idea. I wrote one, but I wrote it, but I'm not quite satisfied with it being the second in the series. So I put it at number 4, number 5, the one I actually wrote, the first draft. So I've got another idea, and that one I think will be the second in this series, and I will start writing that soon. But I decided I wanted a lighter kind of writing because we had a pandemic, and I didn't want anything dark, So I decided to write. So during the pandemic, and I'm actually part of quite a few writing associations out there, and one of the ones I joined because in Britain I'm a member of the Crime Writers Association, which is quite good, but I discovered another group in America called the Crime Writers of Color, and that met my need because it was not even an association, it was an informal group, but it was formed by a well-known crime writer and three well-known crime writers formed a group, an informal group, to serve the needs of crime writers of color. So if you have color in you, you can join. It's free. It's a forum. And when I joined that group, that's when I started seeing things opening up, because we started collaborating amongst ourselves. So it was during the pandemic. There's an aspect of there because they have different aspects. So I joined the different groups. And one of them was the self-publishing group, because I knew that at some point, some of my series I will self-publish myself. I won't give it to publishers, because I wanted to have control. This kind of control you're talking about, where my book goes. I don't have to go back and say, where does my book come out? I have the control right. So one of the self-publishing group said, oh, why don't you do an anthology out there and publish it for a limited period, for about 4 months. We publish it as an anthology. Let's find a story. And just, I don't know what came to me, but I didn't want to write anything heavy and dark. And besides, they were cozy mystery series writers. I've never written a cozy mystery series. A cozy mystery series is a book that is like I said, the Number One Ladies Detective, which is no blood, no gore, but there's investigation at the heart of it, and it's quite interesting, you know, and it could be based in anything. It could be culinary, it could be food, it could be anything, you know. So I just thought about this character, this lady, very, very African. But I wanted her to be African, but I wanted her to have exposure to wealth, super wealth. So I said, what if there was this lady that had an ordinary life? She's actually an older woman. She's got grown children, and she's a grandmother. And something traumatic happens to her. So something traumatic happens to her to change her to this direction. And she ends up in this place. What will happen? So that's how I created her. And I said, oh, I'll set her in Knightsbridge. You know, the cats among the pigeons. Oh, yes. Let me set her in Knightsbridge. Let me put her in this place. Let me put her in a guest house. Let this guest house be this guest house for the super rich. So anybody can come. Anybody. So I was able to play with my imagination, and I'm bringing different people into the guest house. So I wrote a short story. I said, let me try it out with a short story and write this mysterious young boy called Ade. So that short story was called The Stranger in the House. And it was a young man called Ade, Nigerian boy, who is a genius, computer genius, and who was hiding. And he was a housekeeper there. She became friends with him. So I wrote that story, gave it to the anthology, didn't think much about it, didn't know whether it would work or not. And we publicized it in various blogs. And it kept coming back again and again. So because those blogs there's about 12, maybe 13 people in the anthology, and they'll pick out the stories that they like the best. And about 4 of the anthologists picked out that story and said they liked it. I said, okay, interesting. Let me write a novel about it.
Yeah. So that's how you get the ideas. You get feelers for it, and then you expand on it.
Yeah.
So I know we've been on for over an hour now. I apologize for taking your time.
That's all right.
I'll just ask a final question. Before I started recording, we were discussing it. You know, I would just like for you to talk about giving back to Nigeria. How can we help emerging authors? How can we help the publishing industry? What encouragements would you give, and what kind of ideas that will be value driven that we can, as an entity, TNN, collaborate with you and people on ground in Nigeria to develop? We are quite willing, which is what we are really. We're quite willing to bridge that gap and try and develop something. At the moment in my brain, I can see a picture forming where we have a few authors in Nigeria. We have a playwright in Nigeria already on TNN. We have a filmmaker in Luxembourg. We have a filmmaker in Germany of Nigerian origin and we have a playwright in Canada. How do we harness this resource from your experience and see about putting a structure or something down, giving to our young, to encourage that industry in Nigeria?
Okay. So what I would say, it's you can't. Yeah, writers have to be readers. So for me, now we were able to kind of like go back to my childhood, and you saw the way I developed, even in the midst of the ghettos. You understand where I'm coming from? There was some
Yes.
kind of development. I know that there's a problem with access to libraries in Nigeria, that it was not like the Nigeria in which I grew up, where I could have access to libraries, and my parents had personal libraries that I could delve into as much as I wanted, right?
Yeah.
But there's online space now. Some of those young people have access to social media and are doing incredible work out there because they realize that, you can make money on the social media. So if a young person has that kind of access to social media, then you can have, if you are really, really keen to write, then you have access to ebooks. Okada books, I love to bits, because Okada books gives you the platform to go in there and read. And they don't just have, they have books that are free. So if you join the platform, there's free books in there. So like I said, if you want to be a writer, you have to be a reader. That's the first thing. You can't just come out and say, I want to be a writer, but you haven't written anything. Then in terms of, say, helping the young people out there, for me, in my head, what I was kind of like thinking about was to create a prize. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a big prize, as in like you have to it's big money. Prizes these days are not even that much anyway. So a few people can put money together, or one person can put money together. I'm thinking about creating a prize anyway. But for me, because I'm in crime writing, and where I am now, there's not many people. We're not, the crime writers of color in the UK are not many. I say color, as in like, they always say diverse crime writers, or crime writers that are from Black and Asia, BAME, here in the UK are not many. We can count ourselves on our fingers. At the moment, I can't even think of a Nigerian female crime writer, but there's quite a lot of Nigerian literary writers that are doing extremely well. So if I was going to form a prize, I would form one where there's someone like me somewhere who is desperate or wants to write in the crime genre of any type, and they don't even have the voice, or they don't even know how to start. That kind of prize would bring those talents out, So that's something that I have in my mind. Workshops are very important. Chimamanda was doing workshops. She does workshops in Nigeria. So you go to Nigeria and you actually start a workshop. Choose a few choice people and mentor them. So I'm interested in probably starting a kind of workshop where I can mentor young writers to come up. And like I said, I'm not going to, because there's quite a few literary writers out there who will probably be mentoring. I will mentor them in the mystery and crime genre, even maybe sci-fi. I like sci-fi, so I don't mind doing sci-fi as well. But I wanted to kind of, because this medium is very, very, very well read, but it's a very, very wide space. A lot of people think that they cannot get in, but you can have your voice. And for me, I don't know, call it stubbornness or call it whatever. For me, if only one or two people are reading my work and discover my work and they're reading it and they enjoy it, that's satisfactory for me. I'm not setting out, yes, I'd love to make money, but I'm not setting out to say, oh, I have to make money with this. I'm passionate about writing what resounds within me and maybe will strike a chord in someone else, but centering my characters who are Black and African in those narration. Somebody was telling me recently, he said, when I said, oh, she's a Black British Nigerian police officer, said, oh gosh, there's nobody like that. There's none. So I want to center our characters, center us, and say, look, yes, we can write literary fiction, but we can write this as well. We can write different kind of fiction. So that's what I want to do with keen young people who, they have to be some way. It's not just, because if you don't have the passion, where will you start from? So they have to have that. In terms of collaboration with others, people out there, everybody is busy with their time, but you can do collab one-to-one with people. If you have ideas, you can do collabs. And this day and age, I know that, one of the challenges in, say, somewhere like Nigeria is the data. A lot of people suffer from not having enough data. Data is so expensive. But I'm hoping at some point it will get cheaper and people can learn, because this knowledge, you can now seek so much free knowledge, free things out online. And I've come across a lot of young Nigerians that are doing very well, just what they've learned, and they are just using that to teach. But we're talking about the grassroots, the young ones that don't even have that kind of access at all, that have no idea. Those ones will have to just help to a point, They still have to meet the level of education at some point before they can, develop. So yeah, it's just people committing their time and saying, look, there's an idea. Just like the way I did with the crime writers of color, I've done a second collaboration. There was a story that is going to be published in November, and that story is another character, another series. I've thought about this character for years, and I decided to do a short story around her, set in Oshogbo. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So what I'm saying is that you can collab, you can collaborate and bring out your ideas any way you want.
Brilliant, Stella. I am so grateful. It's been a real engrossing conversation. I just want to say, first and foremost, thank you for giving TNN the access to someone with your level of expertise and your level of experience.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I actually love what you're doing. I wish you well with it, because I know that it's a journey. It's a journey, and that it will take. It's not something that will come overnight. With commitment and right partnerships, and there are lots of people out there who want to help. I think things will go well.
Thank you.
So well
Thank
done
you so much. Thank you.